Hello everyone, this is part 1 of What If Naruto Ran Away from Home. This story is made by Foy the Snooze Button, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Working in the red light district of Konoha, especially at night, was never safe. There were robbers, rapists and kidnappers, among many others, that willingly preyed on those dumb enough to roam around at any part of the day. The ninjas of the village made living in the dangerous district a bit safer, yes, but there was always that niggling feeling of dread that something big was going to happen. The Blooming Sakura was a brothel that stayed operational from 9 in the morning to 6 the next morning, a clear 22 hours, and it was most visited, so much so that the matron of the brothel capitalized on the popularity of her irresistible workers by opening a bar in the main lobby of the large brothel. An advertisement for a bartender of any skill level, even 0, of which he or she would be trained, was placed around the village, but no one was hired. Mainly because the workers that moved around were so charming and, sometimes, unconsciously seductive that hardly anyone could remain flaccid, male or female. They would chase the girls and molest them. The bar idea was almost shut down, much to the matron's dismay, until a 10-year-old boy with mint green hair and fiery red eyes approached her with a flyer and pleaded with her to employ him. He needed a stable job to be able to pay his rent and buy food for himself, and he was tired of doing menial labor that always came and went. Against her better judgment, the matron employed the child. She pitied him and was at the same time intrigued by the air of mystery around him concerning his past and his identity. She sent the boy out with some money to learn basic bartending from a bar in the Akamaki clan, a class that took about a week to complete, and he was set to work tending to the bar of the Blooming Sakura. The green-haired child named Kyohi was as respectful to the Shei workers as much as possible and stayed professional, no matter how hard it was, with all the girls sauntering around him, pinching his cheeks and cooing over him in his uniform of a white shirt, sleeved button-up shirt and black slacks with polished black shoes. He was an oddity to them, not only because of his mint green hair or his bright red eyes, but because of his general aversion to women, borderline paranoid fear, and his unwillingness to share information about himself. Kyohi was deathly afraid of females, mostly those from 12 upwards, and this was obvious with the way his shoulders trembled whenever the girls swarmed him, petting his head and coddling him. The matron asked him why he applied for a job in a brothel, with about 40 popular women of all kinds working inside, when he was so scared of women. His answer was simple. The pay is good, he said, distractedly smoothing down his shirt and placing a small jug and saucer of sake to a waiting customer. He didn't look at her, so the woman couldn't see the deep-seated hatred burning in his blood-red eyes. I really need this job. She shrugged it off and left him to work, hoping that one day he would overcome his fear of women. 3 years later. I think you've had enough for one night, sir, Kyohi said as he cleaned a mug of beer with a clean sky blue rag. The man he was talking to, a droopy-eyed brunette man in a disheveled corporate suit, burped and slammed his fist down on the counter, an action that made the green-haired bartender briefly look at him, unimpressed, before he went back to arranging his assortment of mugs, tumblers, wine glasses, saucers and shot glasses. I don't care, gimme another cup of beer. He banged his fist onto the counter again, and this time Kyohi looked at him with slightly narrowed eyes, fluidly placed 3 red saucers before 3 newcomers, 2 women and 1 man, and pushed 3 small jugs of sake to them, this because they were somewhat regulars and Kyohi had their favorites and special orders memorized by instinct. They called out the thanks to the young bartender, but the boy tilted his head to the drunk, recently unemployed businessman. You've taken above the legal limit, sir. Any more and your liver might give up. That feat itself was remarkable, seeing as the man had slumped into his chair 4 hours ago and Kyohi had been feeding him cup after cup of tea, country imported beer, arguably the best and strongest on the continent. I said. He burped into his fist and swayed in his seat, his eyes getting blurry and fighting to glare at the unafraid boy. Gimme a fucking drink. Let me drown, I don't fucking care. He made to swipe a beer bottle from the other side of the counter, but the bartender slapped the man's hand away. A drink, fucking brat. Kyohi noticed the attention they were getting from the commotion the drunk was making, so he cleared his throat and said, Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Some of the women that lived in the brothel, the workers, perked up and half paid attention to what their woos were saying, watching almost earnestly at the bar where the suit-wearing man stumbled off his bar stool and shook his fist in front of Kyohi's face, swearing. If you don't gerp, a doctor and now, I'ma break my foot up. He pointed his finger at Kyohi and the boy looked at the finger for a second before he looked back up at the man, tapping his fingers on the table and still perfectly calm, even for a 13-year-old boy against a 40-something-year-old man. Sir, don't point at me. Kyohi intoned in a low voice, one that the man and those closest to him could hear, and the controlled voice was laced with a sliver of emotion, just a small dose. Those at the bar could feel goosebumps run up and down their arms as Kyohi's fingers stopped tapping. On the other side of the room, standing close to the bottom of the staircase leading up to her workers' rooms, the matron murmured a low curse and sipped her wine. Kyohi didn't like being pointed at. The drunken man snorted messily. In what, you gonna do about it? He jabbed his finger forward to poke Kyohi's forehead, but the boy's hand blurred up, so fast that the patrons of the bar, and basically everyone watching the spectacle, blinked in surprise. The mint-haired snapped up the man's finger, breaking it and bringing the man down onto his knees in screaming tears. Wait. The teen squeezed the man's finger again before he pushed it away from him, making the crying man stumble backwards. Get lost. The man mutely ran out with his head bowed, forgetting his briefcase close to his stool. Kyohi breathed out with his eyes closed and turned around. Facing the semicircular wall of alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks he was solely in charge of, knowing full well that the patrons and workers were raptly staring at him from his small display of strength. He smoothed down his short-sleeved white button-up shirt and checked his dark purple suspenders, an accessory that was crossed at his back but parallel to each other at his front, as well as something the matron and her girls unanimously agreed made Kyohi look all the more adorable. He checked his formal black pants and pulled up his white gloves, adjusting his neat collar with a jerking motion, and looked at the reflection caught by a wine bottle of a man sliding close to his counter. Sake. The man grunted, rubbing his nose with the back of his hand and leaning heavily on the counter with his elbows. Kyohi nodded and gave the man what he requested, sweeping up a few rue notes on the counter, left by a few past patrons, and idly noticed that his tip jar was a bit higher. He placed the money in the counter and went about cleaning up after the past customers. Gradually everyone went back to buzzing to themselves, men flirting with women and women reciprocating as much as they were paid to, some listening animatedly to even the most unattractive and boring men, and some rolling their eyes and filing their nails at even the best-looking men. The boy did his part of the job perfectly, serving up requested drinks, ensuring no one drank too much without paying and no one died of drinking too much. He also lent an ear out to those that simply needed someone to talk to, humming and nodding once they got started. Hours rolled by and there were less and less people in the main room and more people upstairs with the women. The green-haired boy thanked his lucky stars that the matron had the walls insulated so he couldn't hear anything. Currently, the boy was cleaning a sake saucer and silently listening to a shaggy-haired woman ramble. I loved him, she cried, gripped the beer mug with tight hands and sobbed into her drink. I sacrificed my whole life for him, and what do I get? I catch him sleeping with my own mother. Can you believe that? Quote. She wailed, and Kyohi pursed his lips and shook his head gently, mutely telling her that what her boyfriend did was not right. His burning red eyes were fixed on hers, and the woman mourned her luck, loosening up more and more from the eye contact. Then he has the balls to tell me that he loves her and she's not even ashamed. You know what I did? Kyohi could hazard a guess on what the woman did as soon as she found her boyfriend on top of her willing mother, but he still shrugged to get her to offload her sadness. I threw his whole wardrobe out of the window and set it on fire. Then I kicked both of them out before they could get their clothes on, and all his nasty-ass porn novels, I burnt him too. Tomorrow I'm going to cut him from my bank account. Kyohi nodded and turned, serving a cup of hot water to a man wearing a large straw hat. The boy's red eyes briefly watched as the man dropped a black-sheathed katana onto the counter and curled his fingers around the cup of water. The man's dull black eyes shone through the dark recesses of the straw hat, noticing the boy's averted yet pointed bright red eyes flick to his blade. He shook his head and pulled it back to him, leaning it on the ground next to his legs. I cannot part with my blade. Then please do not draw and use it inside here, sir. The boy politely said. Of course. Then Kyohi went back to listening to what the ranting Inuzuka woman was saying, making sure to keep a careful eye on the man that brought in his weapon. She went on as if her sole listener's attention had not been diverted until, an hour later, she was peacefully snoozing on the counter, drooling tiredly and twitching every once in a while. Kyohei went around the counter and helped her to her feet, leading her to a sofa in the main room and placing her there. He threw a blanket over the woman before he returned to his station, where the swordsman was still sitting, gently sipping his third cup of hot water. As Kyohei was cleaning up the almost empty bar, his cautious red eyes got a good look at the man. He was in an open dark gray kimono with a short-sleeved black shirt and combat pants underneath, wearing a pair of wooden sandals, of which Kyohei could not see from his point of view. From what he could see from the darkness of the straw hat, the man had a smooth chin and a sharp nose. Kyohei could make out the symbol for Iron Country tattooed to the back of the man's left hand that was slashed off by a clean X. The man noticed the discreet once-over Kyohei gave him and his shoulders shook unnoticeably with laughter. Why are you so cautious, child? Kyohei was silent for a moment, then he stopped cleaning out a beer mug and stood still. My job is to be cautious, sir. The man chuckled. I suppose it is. The man allowed his body to relax a bit more as he leaned on his elbows, a show for Naruto to also drop his guard. I have to wonder though, why would a child of your upbringing stoop so low as to work for prostitutes? The mint-haired boy studied the man, visibly unfazed by the fact the man mentioned his upbringing. To pay the bills. He then added as he placed the mug where it was supposed to be. And, it's not stooping low when I'm already scum. Why would scum learn a fighting style? Self-defense. There was a visible pulse from the boy's eyes and his calm expression reduced into an invisible frown. You tried to cast a genjutsu on me. Not a genjutsu but an illusion. The man answered with a sip of his hot water. A genius like you should already be a Junin. I'm not a genius. Then what do I call you? The man said with a warm laugh. With your job, how did you find the time to train your body and your chakra? There's always time. Kyohei fired back. Not with your schedule, and, this time the man leaned forward to the 13-year-old boy and motioned for the boy to come closer, though the boy did not, only looking around and noticing that no one was in the main room. Not especially, when you're on the run. He ended this with a large grin from under his straw hat and Kyohei's eyes hardened, changing from bright red to dark crimson. 4 years running from Konoha ninjas when all this time you've been living and thriving right under their noses. Kyohei checked again to see if no one was around before he cracked his fingers at his sides. I mean, it took me about as long to find you, I'll admit, but you're one crafty little guy, huh? The man was still talking, relaxed and jovial. A year away from your worried parents and having to survive on the streets like a rat, wait no, a mole, hiding and nibbling on any cracker you manage to find. Then you enlist to work here and life is a bit better. He sat back and pushed his empty cup to the growingly tense bartender. Why did you do it, Naruto? The man asked as he stood up, picking up his sheathed blade. Why did you run away? The disguised boy's jaw clamped down hard and he breathed in and out through his nose, cooling down his heart and focusing his mind. This place doesn't need to be destroyed, child, the swordsman said as he looked around the brothel. If you give me a good reason for why you ran away, then no one has to get hurt. So they hired another tracker from outside the village. Naruto summarized in his mind, assessing the Ronin tracker from the other side of the counter, his face the image of a totally calm child. His white-gloved hands went up and he placed them flat on the counter, titling his head to the side and having to look up at the taller man with a quirked-up eyebrow. Does anyone know you're here? The man grabbed the handle of his katana with his right hand and the sheath in his other hand, holding the weapon at his left side in a tranquil ready stance. I work alone. Anyone follow you? Lost them in the forest of death. His hand tightened around his blade's handle as the boy kept his eyes on him for a few more seconds before they lowered, his mint-green dyed hair shading the upper part of his face. The man's expert eyes caught the downward twitch of the boy's lips as he gingerly took off his white work gloves and neatly placed them on the counter, showing his pale, thin fingers. You don't want to fight me, child. I'm not going back, Naruto murmured, slowly looking up, putting on a pair of large, smooth-edged, rectangular, black goggles with tinted black visors, allowing the boy's red eyes to glow from deep inside. The man was put more on guard when he saw that the boy's left eye was closed and it shone bright purple, swirling together with a small hexagon projected half an inch from his eye. Eyes fully operational. The voice echoed in Naruto's ear and the boy answered. Chakra, the man took this as his cue to blur to the boy. Destabilizer. Dark purple lightning crawled over Naruto's body like centipedes after he pronounced those words, and a split second later a fast, visible pulse of air exploded outwards from Naruto and covered the samurai as he slashed the blunt side of his blade at the boy's neck. His connection to his chakra was cut off and his whole body fell limp, allowing Naruto to bend under the swing and catch the man by his neck. With his left eye still closed and the hexagon projection spinning before his right eye in the tech goggles, he scanned the man and hummed as he saw that all of the older male's chakra was shut down, thus the Ronin tracker was unable to move his body. Naruto fully pulled the man to the other side of the counter, looking over it to make sure that no one was around to see what he had done before he pulled the man by the scruff of his shirt through the back door, clicking the lock behind him and dropping the man beside a trash can filled with the week's waste. The man choked for air, unable to muster the strength to make his fingers twitch. Naruto stood over him, the samurai's straw hat long blown away from the pulse of chakra destabilizing electricity. The boy looked down on his with a plain expression, holding the man's katana blade and slowly unsheathing it with practiced hands. You probably thought yourself to be so cool coming in dressed like that, the boy said, uncaringly dropping the black sheath at his side and studying the man's blade. It was as plain and boring as he predicted it would be. Thought you could intimidate me into giving up. Naruto shook his head slightly with a frown, his left eye still closed and the hexagon projection still now whirring slowly before his right eyes. Your mistake was underestimating me and thinking I haven't been put through 1,000 times more fear and terror than anyone will want to admit. The man's ragged breathing echoed through the alley at the back of the brothel and Naruto lifted the weapon to the right, an action that made the samurai's eyes widen. As a final jab on the man's belief as a warrior, the green-haired boy whispered, "I'll be keeping your sword." "No, don't." Shushing. His words died in his mouth as his head rolled on the ground away from his body. The last thing he saw before the light left his eyes was the boy tearing off the left sleeve from the man's kimono and using it to clean the blood off his blade. Naruto picked up the dead samurai's sheath and the weapon clicked as it entered. Run a scan through Konoha's security cameras and gather everything you can about this guy. Naruto muttered to his supercomputer. He pulled out a large trash bag from his pocket and began stuffing the man's body inside, not caring much to chop it up first, before he huffed and lifted the full bag into the dumpster. He was the one that burned the refuse in the dump and the girls in the building didn't like going to the back, so he wasn't too worried the dead body would be discovered. 5 seconds later. Done. Did he really have no tail? Yes, sir, she answered. Report. His name is. I don't care about his name. Naruto interrupted as he picked up the dead man's blade, waltzing back into the bar area and stashing the weapon underneath the counter. Of course, sir. His bingo book entry said he hated working with teams and was among the top 10 best trackers in Iron Country before he defected after a failed assassination attempt on the current leader of Iron Country, Mifune. The feminine voice buzzed in the boy's ears as he leaned on the counter and waited for any new customers. He nodded for I to go on. He is especially adept in avoiding capture by conventional and most unconventional means. That's good. Naruto mumbled. Inquiry. Do you wish for me to catalogue his fighting style, sir? Sure. The boy then asked as soon as I was finished, another 5 seconds later. How many styles do we have now? Report. 27, sir. Ha. How come? Report. From observation of ninjas in the training ground and from the styles listed in the Namikaze library. Keep up the good work and give me a full sweep of the building, make sure no real threat is near. Yes, sir. A couple trooped down the stairs and Naruto slickly took off his computer goggles, storing them in his pants pockets. The couple, a beautiful blonde woman and a short, shy-looking black-haired man, sat down near the bar. Naruto observed that the man looked winded and from the perspiration on the man's forehead he assumed it was a good night for him. The boy hid the recoiling hiss he felt surging up his stomach at the sultry look the woman gave him, bowing his head and serving them water before he went to the other end of the semicircular counter. He forced his mind off the woman by dwelling on how he could better improve his supercomputer. AI, short for artificial intelligence, was a supercomputer Naruto had been designing since the very moment he became interested in electrical engineering and mechanics, which was when he was 5 years old. Naruto's father, during the few times he was not holed up in his office, abroad on a diplomatic mission or visiting clan compounds, had Naruto take a specialized shinobi IQ test when Naruto was 7 and realized his child had a genius-level intellect. All he really had time to do was entrust Naruto with a bit more money in his weekly allowance, leaving him in the care of his mother, Kushina Uzumaki. The supercomputer was created by the boy to make complex calculations and propose simple and fast solutions and alternatives to problems Naruto could not think up quite as fast, as well as record every single thing it deemed relevant, such as combat skills of ninjas and samurai, jutsu of all kinds, formulas, chemical compounds and an array of other things. The computer was keyed into Naruto's goggles and in turn solely keyed only to respond to Naruto. Naruto was still very much smarter than the computer, something the self-conscious computer knew very well, but I was ever growing and ever evolving to cater for Naruto's every whim, no matter what it was asked. Naruto's fingers tapped in thought as he stared into space. This is the 4th attempt this month to capture me. He wondered with a hum, nodding his head to the woman and the man as they parted ways. The man left the brothel and the woman returned back upstairs to her room. The red-eyed boy didn't keep his eyes on the lady as she climbed up the stairs, all the while brazenly sweeping her seductive black eyes on the teen. Naruto felt his skin crawl and he struggled to shake the encroaching memories away before he, once again, crumpled into a mess of quivering limbs on the ground. Where did I slip up? He cast his mind back, first a week ago, checking and rechecking everything he had done before his mind went further and further back, months and months in the past. Naruto rarely, if ever, came out when the sun was up, often going about his life at night, and most of the time he didn't bump into leaf ninjas. The library was open all day and all night and the local grocery store closed an hour before midnight. The training grounds were always vacated about 9 in the night and Konoha's nightlife, particularly in the red light district, was too congested for only him to be sighted out, even if his hair was dyed green and his eyes were a bright shade of red. He blended in surprisingly well with the crowd. After a while, he said, boss. Naruto noticed that a report was not added before her answer, meaning she was already outgrowing her model and he had to retouch her circuitry when he got the chance. She had been using that way of addressing him for a long time now and Naruto was conflicted on how to feel about it. She was a month overdue to have her memory banks expanded and for him to program in a few more functions, ones he couldn't pour in at once or else she would crash. I want you to run something by me first. Okay. The computer answered almost hesitantly, wondering where its genius master could be going with this. What are the chances of me leaving this village? He heard the supercomputer buzz with activity in his pocket and answered through the single earbud in his right ear. You have a 41% chance of succeeding. Alive. 29%. With all my limbs. 20%. Naruto felt the doom well up in his stomach. Ever since he fled the Namikaze mansion 4 years ago, security had increased at the gates. There was no possible way for him to leave at his current stage of physical development and the ninjas knew this fact very well, which was why Naruto had not detected more than a few ninja squads leaving the village to search for him, knowing full well that the boy was still trapped within the village. The ninjas didn't look to be going anywhere anytime soon until he was caught and returned back to his parents. Naruto sighed and sat down on a stool on his side of the counter, slumped tiredly on the table and wishing he could have a drink to numb his mind. He couldn't, not because he was too young but because if he did and a tracker came in to capture him, he wouldn't be able to protect himself in his inebriated state. If there was ever a time to relax, it was when all his problems were behind him or if he was dead. How much longer before I'm able to leave this village alive? Then he added as an afterthought. With all my parts. Once combat gloves and boots have been completed, then chances of success would go up by 60%. Making 80%, that was a good chance. Naruto was not at the stage he could create long-lasting clones, as his Uzumaki blessing was still growing and he did not have the Kyuubi, unlike Kushina. What the Ronin had said was true. It was incredibly difficult to find the time away from his job to train his body and to continually upgrade Then there the weapons he was currently trying to make in the questionably safe confines of his apartment. They were to balance out the difference between his body and those of adult Junin and surpass that difference when the time demanded it. His salary in the brothel helped fund his project but he could only buy third-hand, low-quality parts from shady, unreliable dealers. This was so as not to attract the attention of the village authorities if he was to purchase high-quality parts from well-known places. So far, the search for another bartender had ended after he applied and no other reliable person could handle his bar, thus making him more in demand than he preferred. The boy spoke as he put on his white service gloves. Look through as many security cameras you can in the village and find out how these trackers are able to find me after 4 years. Already on it, sir. Thank you, You're welcome, boss. The computer buzzed back, somewhat elated at being acknowledged and thanked. If there was one thing Naruto swore not to do, willingly, was to return back home. He wanted to get as far away from Konoha as possible and hopefully live the rest of his natural life without a name and on an unknown island. Away from his mother. At that very moment. Naruto Uzumaki's bedroom. The Namika's mansion. Kushina Uzumaki loved Naruto more than anything in the world, more so than she even or ever would love her husband. Even if her son was not her biological son and her only contribution in making him was taking care of the surrogate mother while she held Naruto, she loved the boy dearly and would travel to Yomi, dance with Yami and return back without her soul to have her son back. The woman knelt down in her child's fully lit room and ran deceptively calm hands on the boy's impeccably neat bed. She hummed peacefully, something she did to soothe her frayed nerves, and leaned her head down onto the boy's bed, inhaling deeply her child's pure scent, despite how thinned out it was after 4 years of absence, and allowed the smell to calm down her erratically, impatiently beating heart. Tsunade had ruled out the option of bearing a child when the redhead was just a chunin and her relationship with Minato was getting stronger. The star medic said that her womb was too volatile, too saturated with demonic chakra, unable to escape outside her body but soaked into the walls of her womb, that if a child was ever to grow inside then 3 things might happen. The child would die an excruciating death after only 6 months. The child might survive but would be cursed with debilitating chakra poisoning, a dreadful disease that would prevent chakra from flowing within the child and usually resulted in multiple heart attacks and the painful death of the poor child. And the last option was that the child might be born healthy but the brain would be negatively influenced by the QB chakra, and the last option had a 10% chance of happening. Then there was the risk of actually giving birth to the child, alive and healthy or not. The seal keeping the 9 tails at bay would weaken and the fox would use that opportunity to escape. The Yondaime and the Uzumaki princess wanted a child so badly, Kushina more so than her life partner. The redhead's best friend, Mikoto Uchiha, proposed that she would bear her friend's child for her. Kushina was overjoyed at the chance she was getting even though it wasn't truly her child. Minato provided his seed and Mikoto was pregnant after 2 tries in the Konoha hospital. Fugaku was less than happy that his wife had taken such an important decision without his counsel or consent, but the strong-willed Uchiha woman couldn't care less. 9.5 months later, Naruto was born with dark yellow hair and bright red eyes, glinting orbs that sparked of childish curiosity and genius from the very moment he was born. It was as if he had taken traits from both Minato and Kushina, the husband's prodigious mind and his wife's stubborn drive. After the delivery, Mikoto was made to rest but Kushina was too eager to see the child. She had been with her old friend through everything, the pregnancy and the delivery, and Minato was too swamped with Hokage duties to be too involved. As soon as Kushina laid eyes on the tiny child, presented to her by the head medic, she instantly fell in love. She spent several long hours simply staring at the sleeping child, singing gently songs and stroking her child's soft cheek. She vowed that nothing was ever going to make her stop loving Naruto. Nothing was ever going to come between them, evidenced by her giving Naruto her clan name. When Minato found out, he didn't give it much thought, saying that enemies of his name would attack him through his son and that Kushina had done the right thing. The morning Naruto ran away, roughly 4 months after his 9th birthday, her heart visibly shattered. For 4 straight years she joined the Anbu and dozens of ninjas in the village in finding her son, knowing full well that he was still within the leaf. 3 years into her search, she cut into her personal bank account and hired the best trackers from outside the village to find them. 14 in total. She subtly placed undetectable tracking seals on them, to make sure they weren't double-crossing her or they found valuable information on how to find her son. 11 were confirmed dead and about 10 minutes ago a tracking beacon had blipped off but not before she was able to sense her son's presence through the seal for a fraction of a second. No doubt the samurai tracker was also dead by her son's hand but she didn't care about the Ronin. Hiring outside help, particularly missing ninjas, was not something her husband liked but the woman, dissatisfied with trackers from Konoha, went out herself and found trackers. They brought results. They were murdered, yes, but they brought back results. Kushina only needed a few more pawns to get killed off before she could zero in on Naruto's precise location. Next time she found the perfect tracker, a missing ninja that was willing to accept the job, she would have a Konoha ninja accompany the new nin. Someone Naruto had grown to know. Someone smart. Someone skilled. Kakashi. Naruto might kill the masked ninja, but Kushina could craft a tracking seal that would alert her on the precise location of his death. She trained her son herself, she knew what he could do, and, if the boy put in any effort at all, then the copy ninja was most likely going to die. External trackers were notoriously off-balanced when it came to fighting prowess, so it would be up to the masked Junin to restrain her genius son. Naruto would put up a fight, of course, and it would be drawn out enough for the seal to pin down Kakashi's location, but death was inevitable. It would still be a worthy death. Kushina laughed breezily. The woman breathed out and smiled warmly, gathering the bedsheet closer to face before she stood up. She rigidly smoothed out Naruto's sheets, whispering, "Don't be scared, Naru." Her light purple eyes danced happily as she turned to a picture on the boy's desk of him beaming widely and receiving a large, wet kiss on the cheek from his equally smiling, Uzumaki mother. "Mommy's coming to get you." The disguised Uzumaki blinked twice in surprise, pausing after he pulled out a bottle of fine wine to pour into the matron's glass. "Are you sure, Mom?" The woman, a stately woman that didn't look a day over 40, draped in a form-fitting black dress that reached her knees and a fluffy white scarf and waist-length straight brunette hair, sat down elegantly on the bar stool and crossed her right leg over her left, noticing the shaded guard the young bartender put up with expert eyes. She was the only one that knew about Naruto's fear of women, by Kyohi's pleadings. She nodded and watched as the red-eyed child served her a glass of red wine. "I'm sure." She swirled the glass and eyed the boy over the edge. "You've been stressed lately, and I think it would be good if you went on a break every once in a while. Once a year has to stop now, dear child." The green-haired boy squared his shoulders and went back to work, cleaning the cups and saucers and preparing for any customer that was going to come by, which, seeing as it was 2 in the morning, didn't seem that likely. "I'll be fine, Mom. I don't need a break." The matron tittered and her red-painted lips parted slightly with the small laugh. The boy was thinking about his weekly salary. "You will be paid during this break." That statement sold Kyohi. "Okay. How long is my break?" 3 days. And this place would be fine without a bar. The blooming Sakura had been booming more with the introduction of a bar, seeing as it was a place where both men and women of all sexual alignments could enjoy themselves, rather than going straight to their women of choice. Before the bar, most of the people in the brothel were middle-aged men and barely post-adolescent boys, now straight women too hung out around the bar or the main room of the brothel. The woman would admit that the boy had been a key factor in the rapid increase in patrons, both to the bar and to the brothel. "We'll have to close it down until you come back, but we'll be fine. If you're sure." Naruto muttered and placed the bottle of wine close to the woman. "You may leave now." He nodded and placed an "on break" sign on the counter. "I'll be taking my leave now, Mom. Relax, child, and try to have fun too. Oh, and please empty out the dumpster before you go. We both know no one's going to do that." "I'm sorry if I'm asking too much." "It's fine." The boy walked out of the back door of the brothel, masterfully using his body to block the katana blade he had acquired a few hours earlier. He spared a look at the dumpster, where the corpse in the trash bag was undoubtedly beginning to call the attention of the resident bugs in the dumpster. He cracked his neck and jammed the blade through a belt loop on his pants, removing his suspenders and rolling his shoulders before he stood on wooden chair he kept outside for this occasion. He threw open the dumpster, covering his nose at the foul odor that blasted out at him from decomposing fruits, old pairs of underwear and disposed pads. A few rats scampered around inside and the boy suspected that they had already painted the inside of the dumpster with their shit. Bugs and a thin mist of stench wafted out and the boy coughed, spitting foully to the ground and wheezing for air. He hated this part of his job. The dumpster was fairly big and it took about a week of constant usage for it to fill up this much, which was why it was full presently. The girls in the brothel had smaller bins in their rooms and Naruto, adding to his job as a certified bartender, went around and collected them from inside their rooms, into a large dustbin, and after a few rounds to and fro from their rooms to the back door, twice a week, the dumpster would fill up at the end of the week. Among the other things he did in the brothel, other than bartending, was that he oversaw the electricity, attended to clogged toilets and bathtubs and faulty sinks, kicked out any rowdy client that asked too much from the girls or harassed them, and watched for any ambitious person that tried to break into the brothel. The boy, of course, minded the extra work. He minded very much, but there was extra pay attached to the extra work. It took away time from his project and put him at risk of being discovered, though the amount of money funneling into his pocket due to the stellar work he was doing compensated a little. That way he had more funds and the time he could finish his work drew closer and closer. Tears gathered in the boy's eyes as he snapped his head away from the rank dumpster and he spat again, hissing out a low curse. He took in several gulps of air, pushing the lid of the dumpster till it clanked against the brick wall of the brothel, and clapped his hands together. His fingers meshed and he flowed through a set of hand seals. Fire release, incinerator. He muttered and blew out a stream of deep purple fire into the solid metal dumpster. The fire ate away at the refuse easily, washing through the inside and leaving only dark soot on the walls of the inside, adding to the marks past incinerators had left in their wake. The jutsu was a variation of the fire release campfire technique the boy had adapted to be used to solely burn burnable waste. There was no thick smoke that went up in the air as he used this fire technique and no smell of burning wafted in the air, like any properly created campfire technique. He went on blowing fire into dumpster for 30 more seconds before he pulled back and coughed. Thin smoke escaped his lips and he rubbed his nose with the back of his hands. When he looked back inside he remembered that the jutsu, though useful, was still not perfect. Glinting pieces of metal and discarded jewelry glittered from the very bottom, under small mounds of ashes and partly burnt pieces of clothes as well as smooth, small chunks of white bones. The longer it took to normally burn any product the harder it was to fully burn with the incinerator. He knew he was being careless but he was desperate to return back to his apartment and continue his project. He searched for more chakra and whispered, "Fire release, soft ash blanket," and a thick blanket of ash was blasted out from his mouth, covering the bones and the earrings and rings. Normally he would hop inside and gather them into a small leather bag, leaving them on the side of the road for anyone that wished to use them to take but not this night. Naruto slammed the lid down and hopped off the chair. Oh. The ever-familiar smell of cat entered the boy's nose as he climbed up the stairs and entered a corridor of rooms. There was a buzz of televisions and radios, sounds of quarreling couples, crying babies and audible sounds of love-making. He stayed on the third floor of an ignorable, run-down apartment building and just about each room was occupied. The mint-haired boy proceeded down the corridor, uncaring of the people that hung out outside of their rooms and sent him lingering gazes. He swiftly stepped out of the grasp of an old man with beady black eyes, keeping his eyes on the man as he moved away until he tore his eyes away. He passed a room and got a glimpse inside. The bright light was flickering and there was a frail-looking woman, passed out on her ratty sofa and wearing a painfully short blue dress. Some of the people on his floor saw the sheathed weapon on his hip and then subsequently ignored him. There was even a couple that was making out in his way and they didn't care much for the boy that had to squeeze behind him to pass to the end of the corridor of rooms. Naruto retrieved his keys from his pocket, sparing a look behind him at the young woman that opened the door directly opposite his room. She was wearing a soft yellow nightgown and her short black hair was messy from sleep. She had a sleeve of black and red tattoos from her left shoulder blade to the back of her left hand. Back home early, huh? Yup. Naruto answered lowly, rolling out the word and jiggling his keys in the door. It always stuck and it usually took him a few long seconds before it would fully enter and click open. Anything happen? She asked with a yawn and the boy, annoyingly, caught the sound of concern in her voice. He fought down the tremble that rose up in his gut as he no doubt knew she was scouring his back. On a break, he answered, making sure not to stutter, and muffled a curse when the key refused to move into the lock anymore. Ah, okay, she said, leaning on the frame of her door and crossing her arms. Nice sword, she jabbed a thumb over her shoulder, pointing at the selection of combat knives arranged neatly on her coffee table in the living room. I've got a few just like that, straight from Iron Country too. Her room, opposing what was generally seen from the apartment building, was well maintained and clean, devoid of mold and stacked with passable quality furniture. Each room in the building had a small living room that doubled as a kitchen, one bedroom and one bathroom. That's cool, he answered and sighed as the key kept entering. He knew a few ways that could take her down, he was confident enough to say that, but there was always this whimpering creature in his chest that crushed his soul at the thought of facing off a lady, especially a Yakuza enforcer like the black-haired emo behind him. It was an unexplainable fear he had that crippled him, reduced him into a weeping child. Even after 2 years of being this dangerous woman's neighbor and working in a building filled with other women that fawned over him, he hoped to have gotten over this fear. He hated himself. So damn much. Your dad isn't back yet? She asked. Nope. Kid, it's been 2 years. Yeah, I know. He interrupted her. Naruto knew her worry for him was real, despite the amount of blood she had on her hands, reported to him by Ai, she had never killed a child. He disliked being the subject of pity. How about I take you to the police station? I have a few friends there, they'll know how to find your dad. I've gone. They don't know. But, the click of his door unlocking stopped her, briefly. He entered and she said, you shouldn't have to live by yourself, Kyohi. I know. And Naruto closed the door. I turned on the lights and he tossed his newly acquired blade haphazardly onto his single-seat chair. He walked to the kitchen and began making himself a cup of ramen, hearing the Yakuza women speak from the other side of the door. If you want, I can ask around for you. He didn't reply, tearing open the top of his ramen cup and pouring a bottle of water he left on the kitchen counter from the other night. The offer's always on the table, Kyohi. He sat down on his desk and placed the cold ramen cup down, scraping for chakra inside him and breathing out hot mist into his cup ramen. 2 high B rank techniques and a D rank technique couldn't leave him winded, not even close, but he had been working in the brothel for a few days straight and he was dead tired. He removed his eye goggles from his pocket and placed it on the desk, allowing the ramen time to cool down as he pulled out a drawer, removing a pair of gloves and dropping them before him. He could sleep later. The gloves were thick, large and brown. They were the kind used by blacksmiths to handle hot objects, but these ones went up 2 inches or so above the wrist. They looked heavy and cumbersome, especially when thinking about using them to fight, and in truth they were, but when Naruto was done with it, it would more than balance him against any adult ninja. Other prodigious ninjas, like Itachi Uchiha and Yugao Azuki, though were most adults could not really pass them with strength, as they were still children. Like Naruto, what he had over the adults was his sheer speed, dexterity and his intelligence. Itachi and Yugao were 17 now, so they didn't really suffer from the strength difference again. There were adults that could use their strength advantage to overcome child prodigies, and that was why Naruto was scrambling to finish his gloves and boots. Naruto swirled his ramen with a pair of chopsticks and flipped open the back of the brown gloves to reveal the technical and extremely complex wiring underneath. It took Naruto's physical effort and months of work to flatten the things inside the gloves, because if any civilian strength adult were to pick up the gloves, then they would most likely not succeed. The fact that Naruto had easily removed them from his desk was testament to how strong he was, though still not strong enough, in his opinion. He slurped down the last of his ramen, throwing the empty cup over his shoulder and into a small dustbin in the corner of his room. He cleaned the corner of his mouth and put on his goggles. Activate all hologram projectors, he ordered, and 10 clicks went off around the living room. 4 lights beamed out from each corner of the passably lit room, from all 4 sides, and 2 from the bottom corners at the front of his room. The lights focused in the middle of the room, on a 6 by 6 foot reflective panel of glass the boy exposed from underneath his rug, and the boy walked around the concentrated pillar of white light, scratching his chin in thought. He lifted his goggles and fixed it on his forehead and tiredly rubbed his eyes with his knuckles, slapping his cheeks lightly. Show me my gloves. Boss, would it not be better if you rested for an hour before you resumed? I suggested reluctantly, putting up a holographic image of Naruto's pair of gloves, in light color and in admittedly good image quality. I'll be fine. Naruto waved the computer's concern away. His fingers went to the image, sparing a look over his shoulder at the open pair of gloves on his desk, before he expanded the image, looking deep into his gloves and isolating any abnormalities. But, sir, with all due respect, you just came back from 20 hours of work. No person Naruto's age was even meant to work that long. Hell, no adult was meant to work that long. The computer knew its master very well. Naruto didn't like sleeping because that gave his mind time to dream, and the boy never had any good dreams. The boy spoke as he flicked and changed the image of the circuits in his gloves, of which the electronics in the gloves on his desk followed suit. I have to make some progress. Time is of the essence. Now, fire up the core with the reserve power battery so I can see if the reserve battery works. The computer promptly did so, and light bloomed from the palm of the gloves on the desk, shining a harsh purple color, and Naruto nodded. I kept its reservation of Naruto's disregard for his own health to itself, but it did lock the doors and windows of the apartment and increase its awareness. Keep it on, and test out the boy thought deep for the word he was looking for. The pointer finger of the right glove. He checked as power steadily flowed from the palm of the hand and into the pointer finger, gradually rising from the bottom to the top and lighting up the holographic projection with light purple light. Easy, easy, Kyohei muttered, and the light blue holographic index finger and eye did as it was told. A few red and green spots lit up as more reserve power entered, and Naruto examined and plucked out a copy of the problem areas, isolating them and studying them to see the problem. That was a major advantage of him prioritizing the building of his holographic projectors before he even started with his gloves. Naruto's mother didn't allow the boy to hold his allowance, always saying that the boy didn't need the money because he could already have anything without money, which was something that seriously stunted Naruto's research and engineering projects. Whenever Kushina left for a mission, the boy would sneak out of the mansion, when his guards were too lazy to pay attention to him, and went to the scrapyard. He scavenged for anything that could remotely help him. He started doing this when he was 6 and he could not have run away at that time because he had just started his combat training and he was unprepared for life outside of the mansion, unlike now. All he could really do was hiding and running fast, carrying as much as his little arms could. His projectors were made out of broken film projectors, video cameras, laser pointers, of which he fashioned infrared lights from, 6 motion detectors he picked up from the back of a tech store, and an ordinary but large pane of glass. It took him several trips to and from the dump each day for 5 months, a few burnt fingers his mother became suspicious of, and more than a dozen failed tests before he got what he wanted. A fully functional projector, and this was still during the time he was developing fitting the ever-evolving computer into a pair of goggles and giving it 2 sources of power, the sun and his chakra, although the second source Naruto preferred not to use so he wouldn't easily be found out. The projectors were directly connected to any project he was currently undertaking, and, since he finished the projectors before he used it to speed up the creation of his supercomputer, hiding the parts of the computer in a loose floorboard under his bed. Any alteration he made to the projected image, except adding and removing circuitry, reflected off the real item. He could expand and zoom into problem areas, find a proper solution, apply that solution to the project he was projecting. Naruto was not good at sealing. His mother refused to teach him because she feared he would use the ink art to hide things from her, and she sealed away any book the boy could use to learn from. Naruto could not enter a library without Kushina accompanying him, and if he ever did, then the authorities would alert his mother and he would be in deep shit. This all placed a big handicap on Naruto, preventing him from conveniently sealing away his tools and projects, so, in preparation for the day he planned to flee, the boy had to take multiple trips outside the mansion to hide parts of his projectors and the few helpful tools he had created earlier with the help of his projectors. He picked some money out of his main guard's pocket and used it to buy hair dye from a sketchy-looking hair salon in the red light district. The woman agreed to ignore the fact that a 9-year-old boy that shook at everything she grunted, just about ready to bolt at the quickest motion from her, mainly so since he threw more than enough money at her and ran away. He had nowhere to go when he left the Namika's mansion, but he still preferred his homeless, street rat state than going back to his mother. 8 months into digging in the trash cans of seedy restaurants for leftovers, and he found his saving grace in the form of the blooming Sakura. His first salary was enough for him to rent a room in the apartment he was currently in, but he had to use a genjutsu to pose as an adult. The building manager was a civilian, so he could not even sense the bursts of chakra from Naruto, an obvious sign he was under an illusion. A week of going about as an older, black-haired man with red eyes and a young green-haired boy with equally red eyes, and Naruto made his adult character disappear. He didn't know why his neighbor, a notorious member of the Jade Wolf Yakuza, cared that he was living alone, and at the moment Naruto couldn't care less. She was too forward in her intentions to help, and this freaked the boy out all the more, increasing his distrust for her and barely able to keep his mind from crumbling whenever she spoke to him. Naruto rubbed his eyes again and made himself a large mug of coffee, heating up the water with a floating campfire technique, and then returning back to his work. He was diverting most of his salary and extra pay toward his projects and his rent. He didn't have a stove or a coffee maker, but the boy compensated by using fire jutsus to heat up any food he was making. It was stressful on him, but he consoled himself with the thought that he was almost ready to leave the village. He tested all the fingers of his gloves that morning, jittery from his coffee, and patched up any foreseeable problem that related to movement of his fingers and channeling raw strength. With shaking hands he started working on an offensive-defensive counterpart of his gloves that was not strength-related. Nature transformations. It was going to take too long for him to learn Fuinjutsu and reach level 6, which was when he would learn how to draw nature transformation seals, which were seals that summoned specific chakra transformations, like fire, water, lightning, light, dark and the rest, and the boy wanted to reduce how much he used his own chakra so that he wouldn't be sensed, making his elemental attacks near undetectable seeing as they weren't being controlled by chakra. Naruto slapped his cheeks and rubbed his eyes, moving briskly to his kitchen and swallowing another large gulp of his fourth cup of coffee. What's the time now? He asked, removing his white service gloves and randomly threw them to his couch. 6:33 a.m., sir. The computer tried to hide its disapproval at Naruto's work ethic as it gave its answer. The red-eyed boy yawned into his hand, saying, "Bring out nature transformation schematics numbers 5 to 16. Colored projections of plans concerning his gloves Naruto had stored in Ai's database long ago rolled out before the boy, graphics he had created in perfect detail on how he could use elemental attacks with little to no chakra. The boy swiped his hands left and right and hummed, looking at all of them with pursed lips, idly sipping from his mug of coffee from time to time. The reason he had excluded numbers 1 to 4 were because those were the ones he had made when he first began his plans to run away, so they tended to be outlandish and childish. At that thought the boy snorted into his coffee cup, something that quirked up Ai's curiosity. He was standing in an apartment with technology he had created by himself and under severe stress. His goggles alone were a miraculous invention, and the things he had already done in his gloves and boots should have been impossible for anyone, not to even think about what he wanted to use them to do. Everything he did was outlandish, but they weren't childish. He kept in mind the tools he had and the tools he could get to add in the elemental control to his gloves and boots, as he skimmed through the drawings he told Ai to bring out. He had limited supply, so he couldn't go all out. He furrowed his eyebrows in interest when he saw the plans in number 15. His eyes lit up as he remembered exactly how he had come up with this idea. The whole thing looked convoluted and somewhat excessive, but it was what Naruto could work with. Wind was sucked in from 5 separate yet small tubs on the back of each finger, and the amount of power depended on how much Naruto wanted to expel from either his fingers or his palm from the one stored there. Fire was the air processed through an extremely hot source inside the gloves and boots. Lightning was the simplest because I could siphon electricity from live wires and convert it for Naruto to make use of, which, looking at it now, wasn't that simple at all. Earth and water were the hardest, and they made use of equipment that would make Naruto's gloves all the more heavier, seeing as it made use of sound waves of different frequencies. Looking back on that, earth and water manipulation, that is, were the easiest of all, Naruto thought as he made alterations to the 2 difficult elements. His reason: it wasn't the first time the boy was making use of sound waves. Naruto's chakra destabilizer made use of sound waves. You see, all humans and some special animals have chakra, whether it was in large or small cores, whether they were civilian or shinobi. Everyone has chakra, but the subject of chakra was mostly centered on splitting it into its various affinities and how to suppress them. When Naruto had been toying around with his goggles, watching ninjas from his bedroom balcony with them on, he thought of how he could further equalize the massive gap between his refined yet young strength against the experienced and adult strength of older fighters. A book on chakra that the Sandaime had written theorized that chakra reacted to thin, reedy sounds that only dogs could hear, but that study had been abandoned as soon as it was brought up because people just weren't interested, and the Sandaime had better things to do than delve into a funded project on the effects of high-pitched whistles and human chakra, like lead the village through the Second Shinobi War. Naruto could not see sound, even with his eye goggles, but he could see chakra affinities and chakra capacity, each one different settings on his goggles but could be combined at any time. That day he combined them. He inverted the image and added infrared vision. On one of his guards, he could see thin wavy lines, about 4 inches long, coming out of the man's body like millions of strings, waving and fluctuating longer and shorter, though never longer than 3 inches. The boy was used to disappointments, seeing as he had too many close calls and failures in the past, and he didn't want to get his hopes too high, but he still went deeper into his discovery. He stared at the man when he was sleeping on the job, and the wavy lines were about a foot long now. He couldn't touch them and normal eyes couldn't see them, but he was almost certain he was looking at chakra in a way no one had ever seen it. He still refused to get his hopes up, so he snuck out of the mansion and went to a training ground where a genin team were having an all-out spar. The wavy lines on the moving humanoid blackness, which were people, were reacting in sync to the kinds of jutsu they were throwing. This was when Naruto allowed himself to feel proud of his discovery. He called that setting chakra signatures. If he could see chakra like this, instead of in their mass forms chakra capacity and chakra affinity, then he can see if the Sandime's airy theory was correct. He constructed a tremendously high-pitched whistle and tried out the frequencies on his guards. That day was not a good day for any ninja near him. They would feel too weak to move after an inexplicable blast of air hit them, and they were scolded more than once for slacking off. It was when Naruto was trying out his whistle on two sparring Chunin did he find the right frequency to completely shut down the chakra, thus immobilizing the fighters. The only problem was that this action overloaded eye and made it slower after it was used, so Naruto came up with a solution. He focused chakra signature to one eye, his right eye, and in the form of a hexagram that had to spin to see the signatures clearly, and this alone cut down the effort used by more than half, which had to do for now. Naruto called this new addition Chakra Destabilizer. He tested it out on everything chakra related. The destabilizer could break down and kill seals, cancel jutsus, knock out genin and some chunin, paralyze people with junin level of strength and stronger animal summons, as seen during yet another sparring match, and if he was able to get his hands on better tools he would be able to create a usable weapon with it, as well as upgrade his current weapons. Each person had a different pitch that would immobilize them, and it was Ai's job to quickly tune to this pitch and release the pulse of destabilizing energy. Naruto turned around and slid into his desk chair, tinkering with his gloves. He rushed around the room to gather the things he had with him and carefully fixed it into the already stacked gloves, making extra sure it wouldn't mess with the circuitry there already. Boss. Remind me to upgrade you at about noon. Sure. Boss. A sharp pop and a white spark came from the back of his left glove and the boy ran his fingers through his hair, sighing in frustration. Reserve battery has been damaged. I echoed and Naruto nodded. Yeah, I know. Half a year's work was now up in smoke. At least it wasn't burning the building down. He waved away the smoke from the hand and asked. Do the fingers still work? Little finger is not responding. Internal wires have melted. Of course they have. Naruto muttered with an exhale. I'll deal with it later. Turn off all power to the gloves, including the main power source. Done. Alright, let's try this again. The inventor bent down and began tapping and touching parts of his glove with a tiny screwdriver that sparked with muffled chakra, implementing his number 15 nature transformation idea. His supercomputer was eagerly watching, staring at its master working with utmost fascination, taking mental notes. Even the computer wouldn't have figured out the chakra signature setting or the destabilizer. The computer regarded its creator highly, and this was clearly justified in the level of genius Naruto unknowingly showed it on a daily basis. Naruto's next question made it remember that Naruto's fatal flaw was that he thought too little of himself. What have you been able to find about those trackers? Where did I mess up? I have been able to isolate 3 incidences you made your presence known. Yes. The boy mumbled as he fizzed away on his gloves. Last year, when you were training with wind release, you opened a large gash on your palm. Naruto stopped and closed his eyes to remember that day. You placed your hand on a tree and some blood dropped to the ground. It went on. That same night you went to Cloverstick Pharmacy close to the entrance of the red light district, and the security camera saw you purchasing a roll of bandages and some painkillers. Erase that video. Already done, sir, but that wasn't the second incident. Naruto silently rubbed his face at his carelessness. That day he was in pain and his priority was not to bleed out and die on the street. In his haze he could have overlooked secrecy. External trackers were not allowed to get their hands on security videos, but the blood he left on the tree and on the grass could be traced. He winced as I continued. The henge you wore was unstable and you left some chakra footprints on the ground on your way to a back alley close to the clinic. Chakra never really left the environment. It thinned out with time and was reduced to a state where only the best senses could hardly perceive it, but that was it. The red-eyed boy still had the henge on when he left the pharmacy, so his chakra was etched on the ground with each step. This made the boy remember that he planned to add a function to his destabilizer where, after it was used, it would remove his presence from the environment completely, leaving not a single trace of him anywhere, though this was as long as the destabilizer was tuned to removing only his chakra signature from the environment and not anything else. Normally, Konoha ninjas should have found this, as they had 3 reputable tracking clans and a few normal trackers in their midst, but this wasn't so. They wholeheartedly believed that since Naruto was raised in a good house with good food and good clothes, he would stay within the good part of the village, pretty much saying that he was too immature to venture out anywhere bad. they centered most of their searches there and almost forgot about the red light district. It was the fact that they judged Naruto based on his upbringing that had hidden Naruto so successfully for 4 years, and only people that did not know him at all found him after a few long months of searching. Naruto couldn't do anything about the footprints for now, so he waved for I to keep going. What's the last incident? Third is that Kyohi is unregistered in Konoha's citizen or migrant registry. There are dozens of people that aren't registered. You know, kids born on the street, some of families in the civilian council because they don't want to pay the registration, citizenship fee and whatever. Sir, you are the only person of your age with red eyes. Oh yeah, the boy whispered and paused in his work again. Naruto had been born with bright red, sometimes alternating to dark red, eyes, and the only reason proposed by Tsunade for this was because Mikoto, his biological mother, was an Uchiha and the clan genes had passed to him in that way. Or something like that. In the beginning he didn't have enough money to buy stylish contacts, and now that he had the money to buy he couldn't use them because they were too thin to fully block out the brightness of his red eyes. Like if an Uchiha was to activate his Sharingan and wear contacts, the contacts just wouldn't work. When Naruto asked for any thicker set, those ones almost rendered him blind. He ultimately dropped the contact lens idea. At night he didn't really stand out, but he was still a child with bright red eyes. Red eyes were a very noticeable feature. The upside to having such distinct eyes was that illusions didn't work on him. He couldn't fully explain it, but his eyes were like eternally activated Sharingan, so Genjutsu just didn't work. Speaking of eyes, Naruto found his own beginning to close. He dropped the screwdriver he was using, seeing as his vision was getting foggy and his eyes were heavy. Working anymore would cause more than solve problems. He fell off his chair and crawled to his couch, lying half of his body on it before sleep finally took him. About that same time, 5 miles outside of Konoha, Western Forest, Fujimura Forest. She left the village a few minutes after leaving her child's room, after wearing all of her shinobi gear. Kushina had been skipping from tree to tree for about 2 hours, following her gut to where she knew her target was coming from. The high S-rank Kunoiki was wearing a dark red short-sleeved shirt and black shorts with dark red tights coming down to orange-heeled shinobi sandals. Her right arm was wound up in bandages, from her fingers and disappearing into her tight, form-fitting shirt, and she was wearing a Junin flak jacket over her torso. Her straight, waist-length red hair was tied up into a messy ponytail. The legendary Kunoiki's weapon of choice, her dual katana, Red Ripper, was an intricately crafted weapon that had been specially made for her from Azushio before she had been shipped to Konoha, meaning she wasn't allowed to use it until she graduated from the academy. It had a crimson red handle and the blade itself was pitch black, made out of cursed obsidian metal with its cutting edges buzzing with dark red power. On both sides of the handle were 9 white whirlpools. The weapon was securely strapped to her back, which she could easily wield from over her shoulder, and could only be wielded by her. Her bright purple eyes were narrowed in concentration and her hyper senses informed her that her target was blazing, unsurprisingly, from the direction of Amigakure. The person changed directions and ran northeast from her and she dutifully followed. Her bandaged hands curled and she stopped tree jumping when the person entered a glade with a running river and plush grass. She perched herself on the tree and watched the man with an expressionless gaze. I know you're there, come out now. He turned around and glared at her with a sharp, sadistic smirk, and all he could see were bright purple eyes shining from inside the dark cover of a tree. The eyes disappeared as they closed and reopened again from the bottom of the tree, something he tried not to let startle him. His blue skin prickled as she woman simply stared at him for a few long seconds, and he subtly prepared to draw his weapon if the other S-rank came at him with hostile intentions. Wind rustled through the peaceful glade and his black with red clouded cloak rustled with it. Kisame suppressed a shiver and grinned widely at Kushina, showing his rows of serrated shark teeth. Are you only here to stare at me? He wasn't too sure on who the person was. He applauded how well suppressed the person's chakra was, but the chilling coldness in her eyes gave him goosebumps, forcing him on guard with each passing second until Kushina took 2 steps out of the darkness and placed her unbandaged left hand on her hip, tilting her head to the side slightly and matching the missing Kiri ninja's wide grin with her own wide grin, showing her glaring white teeth and her sharp canines. Hello. The man knew exactly who she was and he had half a mind to just turn tail and run. Yes, he was as proud as the sun was bright, but he knew when he was outmatched. He snarled and his right hand gripped the handle of his sentient sword, barely keeping the thing from not tearing off its bandaged wraps. What the hell do you want? Kisum had faced off against the woman once, when they were younger and he was brasher. The woman was absolutely crazy, in his unbiased opinion, and it was an act of karma that he had been able to escape with his life. She sauntered towards him, saying, "I have a job for you." He bared his teeth and Samehada winced at the iron grip he had on its handle. "That's close enough." The redhead giggled behind her hand. "Come on, kiss him, it's been years. You're not still mad, are you?" Back then he had ambushed her for her Kumo bounty when she and her teammates were leaving Waterfall from a recently completed mission. The condition Kushina had put him in made him wonder how he was even able to leave that place alive. He then made it a point from that day on to never bump into her again. Back then she was a fresh Junin and had almost murdered him with her wild, animalistic style of fighting, and now, looking at the confident redhead with fear shaded in his eyes, he knew she was stronger. It took Kisum slaughtering 40 or so Suna ninjas for Samehada not to revolt on him. He took a step back and the woman laughed again. "I take that as a yes. Tell me what you want and go." He grunted. She got into business, though her large smile only reduced into a friendly one. "I want you to find someone for me and bring him back to me. Alive. I'm not a tracker." He snapped and made to turn around, but thought better of it and ensured he was still looking at her. He couldn't claim to have all his sanity intact, not when you wielded a living weapon and operated in the Akatsuki, but then again you have to be a special kind of crazy to freak out Kisum, and that was saying something since the former Kiri ninja worked with Hidden and he was not in the least bit afraid of the Jashin priest. While Hidden might as well be clinically insane, Kushina was a different kind of crazy and Kisum wanted nothing to do with the other S rank. Unlike when he first encountered her, when he younger and prouder, he simply wanted to get as much distance as possible from her, but the woman was having none of it. "The thing on your back can sense chakra," she said to him with a coy smirk. "I said, I'm not a tracker." He bit and her purple eyes darkened. "Don't raise your voice at me, Kisum," she said lightly, and the man felt a terrible chill run over his body at her tone. "Look," he said, feeling perspiration break out on his forehead. "I don't want any trouble. How about this?" she said and slipped 3 steps closer to him. His feet felt like solid lead, fixed to the ground as she approached him. Her smile became disturbingly menacing and her eyes curved up warmly. "You do as I say, or else," she dragged her slender pointer finger along his jaw and whispered, "I'll kill you." He grit his teeth powerfully and wrenched his feet from the ground, backing away several steps. He spat, "Crazy bitch." A vein throbbed on her forehead. "This person is inside Konoha. You will find this person and incapacitate him without harming him or shredding off any limbs," she ordered, and any more words died on his tongue. "You'll work with a friend of mine, Kakashi Hatake, and when you succeed I'll pay you and you leave with your life." She motioned to and from herself and Kisum. "Do we understand each other?" He glared hatefully at the clearly threatening woman but nodded once. "Awesome." She tossed him a shirt Naruto had once worn. "Find him." She turned around and entered the darkness again, seamlessly blending in. Her words echoed after she left, chilling the Akatsuki member to the bone. "You have 1 week. Kami, damn it." Next time on Red Lights. Who robs a house at 11 in the morning? X. The boy looked up, not in the least bit fazed by the fact that he had just killed a man, and his eyes narrowed slightly at him. His iris became a bit smaller and took a darker shade of red. The message was clear. If the police came, then he was going to murder everyone. X. Orochimaru of the Sannin's fingerprints have been confirmed to be on the letter, boss. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.